So I think Arc Raiders could be solving the extraction shooter problem, and it's a big one because many people, myself included, have always sort of thought extraction shooters would never have broad appeal. They're punishing, they're high stakes, you can lose all your stuff, nobody really likes that. I've always maintained if a game is going to have disruption as part of its just natural DNA, you're naturally just going to turn people off. They're not going to want to play a game where that can happen. Well, it seems like Arc Raiders could be proving that wrong. They seem to have a lot of broad appeal. The numbers are good just for a server slam. And this game was originally going to be a PvE looter, but this is one of the reasons they changed it. It just didn't have high enough stakes. They described it as being sort of boring. I had to even concede the last time I played Sea of Thieves, as much as I would prefer just a total PvE environment, the persistent threat of other players adds an intensity that wouldn't be there. I remember loading stuff onto my boat thinking anybody could come by at any moment. Well, the same thing happens in a game like Arc Raiders. If you have that persistent threat of other players, it creates an intensity that's memorable, but it also makes the game feel like it's got some rough edges, like people are not going to want to put up with that. But from what we're seeing, they may be solving that problem. They may have created an environment and a feel and an experience that's overriding people's sort of sense of that rough edge. And one of the things that keeps coming up in all the videos that I've watched is the dynamic player engagement. They are trusting you with proximity chat to just sort of do the thing, just play the game. Now, it could obviously get toxic and trollish, but in general, they are just trusting you with that. And it leads to emergent experiences. Like, you never really know what's going to happen when you start kind of going back and forth with somebody. They could be lying to you. They could double cross you. They could help you all the way to the end and you both leave and you kind of high five. And maybe you start playing together after that. Well, that trust between the developer and the player base, I think, is a great seedbed for longevity. It makes people feel like, hey, you respect us enough to give us this ability, and it does lead to very memorable moments. And that's what will make people come back. It'll make people do fun skits and pranks, and clips will go viral. Well, that's one way to keep your game relevant, but also enjoyable, because you can always sort of craft your own experience, and it's never really going to be truly the same, even though you're constantly going into environments that are familiar. The other thing that we keep hearing from everybody playing is that the PvE is an actual threat. Now, this is obviously because it originally was going to be a PvE game, and they probably really benefited from all that development time. This creates a great two-sided coin where there are players that can kill you, but there are also arcs and robots and things that can kill you. They're not just sort of there as cannon fodder, like a couple of shots and yeah, get out of here. They are truly threatening and also really intelligent. You've seen the clips of people who are like up really high and they think they're safe, and then they're suddenly not safe because these things jump all the way up. And this is all, I think, tied together with player choice. They're giving you the choice to do certain things on your own terms. One of those things is whether or not you want to wipe your players' progress in order to get some of the new stuff and some of the new benefits, like things that are going to be running for like 8-week periods. You can choose to wipe within that period and you get benefits for doing so. But if you don't want to, you can completely opt out. Now, this could end up being a weakness for the game, because if you never really reset, the rich could keep getting richer, they could feel very stacked, and players who don't play quite as often might start to feel like the game is leaving them behind. So this player choice, I think, is getting praise right now, but long term, it could have its own complications. Another thing that makes this game stand out, which I think is undeniable, is the cinematic quality of the game. When I first saw early gameplay, I thought there's no way an open world PvP game with players running around is going to look that good. Well, they've nailed it. It's very sort of familiar to how I think Helldivers 2 has its own look and feel and cinematic quality, and it really makes you want to be in the game doing stuff. I remember saying this about New World, completely different game, but the lighting and the sound and the environments, it was just very pleasant to be in that game. And I think that goes a long way. It makes folks want to come back to it. Now, people have debated about whether or not it should be a third-person game or a first-person game. If it was a first-person game, I think the cinematic quality would still be there, but there's something about that like pulled-back camera and the scope and the size of the world that gives it a feel. The game certainly has an identity. As soon as you see people playing, you're like, oh, that's Arc Raiders. First person, I think it's harder to pull off because the guns themselves would have to be where the identity is really pulled from, because that's primarily what you see when someone's playing a first-person shooter. Like, the gun eats up so much screen capital. That's great in a game like Borderlands, where the guns can have very iconic and noticeable identity. I think it's more difficult in a game like this. It's a little bit more grounded in the real world with like more real-world looking weapons. Now, alongside all of this, giving player choice, dynamic player engagement, they've made it approachable as a solo player. That is vital. So many live service games, so many games like this make the game too contingent upon playing with others. I've consistently maintained that will be a huge problem for a game like Marathon that they have to be considering with their internal playtesting, because there will be lots of people that just boot up and want to play. They don't want to try to find somebody to play with. Maybe their buddies aren't around, or they just kind of want to do their thing. Now, that kind of works against the dynamic player engagement if they're not choosing to plug the mic in and talk to others. But with the way those experiences tend to go, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of solo players start plugging in a microphone, because it could increase their survivability. But being friendly to solo players is vital, I think, for a game like this to be successful. I'll talk a little bit more about whether or not that will lead to a PvE mode in a moment, but just know, giving people the option to reset and being friendly to solo players is a pretty casual leaning posture. Like, they know they can't live off of just the hardcore players, and the way they're setting this game up really shows that. Now, the cinematic quality of the game isn't the only thing people are praising either. The sound quality is getting a high amount of praise from the people that are playing it. This sort of goes hand in hand with what I said a little bit about New World. Like, the sound design of that game always made it so pleasant to be in it. This is another aspect of just wanting to be in a game. If you're going to consistently engage with and re-engage with a game, there needs to be something nice about just being in it. And creating great memories with the voice chat and all of that, that is sort of very much dovetailing and coupled with this game that just looks and sounds good to be inside of it. And the last piece that we're seeing lots of praise for is obviously the extraction. You have to nail that part of the content loop, because it needs to be potent and intense and memorable, because that's what makes people come back. They're going to remember those funny moments where somebody double-crossed them or helped them, or they crawled in and pushed the button and barely made it out alive. Those are the things that stick with the player. Those are the things that make people come back. Now, all of this to me could point to a game that breaks the mold and says, listen, extraction shooters are niche and they don't appeal to lots of people. We're going to build one that's just so good, so fun, so good looking, people are going to want to come and play it. But there are questions that remain, and one of them is the price. Is that going to be a barrier? Because if you're sort of on the fence, you're like, I don't know if I want to play an extraction shooter. I've heard stories where it can be frustrating. We know it's high stakes. We know it's punishing. Do I want to drop $40 on this game? I would say, in sort of the grand scheme of things, they're achieving consumer demand. They are achieving what is difficult right now, which is getting everybody's attention and making everybody talk about you. Like, that's really hard, because 2025 is a year full of games, and grabbing people's attention is very, very difficult, especially sort of in the shadow of how great like a game like Battlefield 6 is doing. Arc Raiders is managing to steal the limelight a little bit. Like, everybody's talking about their game. That is going to be key to convincing folks to drop the $40 on the game. Long term as well, you got to think, once the game spins up and is going, word of mouth could motivate people to spend that $40. But that's also related to my next question. How will player wipes affect the meta? Are you going to end up with just stacked to the rafters players who have been wiping and getting all this great stuff that makes the game inaccessible to people who play a little more casually? Or maybe you're new to the game and it's been out for 6 months and you feel like everybody you run into is just absolutely stacked and they've got so much stuff, and you're sitting here with sort of a scuffed kit or like basic equipment. they're going to have to consider that. You're going to have players that don't wipe almost ever and people that do it all of the time. How do you have those people sort of coexisting? I think that's going to be a challenge. And that is related to the next big question. Will they ever add a PvE mode? Tarkov added a PvE mode, and their posture to wipes shows me they know, hey, we need casuals to play this game. We can't only appeal to the hyper hardcore players. And I know people will say, well, you can't have a game that appeals to everyone. I agree with that. I don't think this game would appeal to everyone anyway, because it's a third-person shooter, because it's extraction, because it has PvP. It automatically isn't going to appeal to everybody, but to the people that it does appeal to, like within that player funnel, you're going to have people that play less often, even though they like the game. So they would be, more casual. You don't want to lose those players. I think their posture with wipes and with resets, I really do think that shows that, like, we need casual players in here just as much as the hardcore, so I could see them adding a PvE mode. Now, I've consistently said you would not want this to affect the main game. This would be sort of like a retreat. Like, hey, go over here, there's no other players, you can kind of get back to some base level gear. If you really get knocked down and you lose a lot of stuff in currency, it can be pretty demoralizing, especially when you go back in and you feel like it's kind of a double whammy. You're like, well, now I'm in here and I'm weak and I don't have a whole lot of stuff, and there are other players in here that are making light work of me, okay? You could have a PvE mode where there's sort of a cap on how good the gear can be. You're just trying to kind of get kitted back up to step into the real arena, the real mode where there's other players that can kill you. It's just sort of a way to retreat and be like, hey, I need to get my stuff back, which I do think could be helpful. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see a PvE mode in the future. I'm not trying to make this game something else. I think sometimes you just have to let a game be a game, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. But this type of a PvE implementation would not grate against the spirit and identity of the game. It might actually help it to just have more people feeling like they have an on-ramp to get into the game, as opposed to just being thrown to the wolves, if that makes sense. Another thing to consider as far as lingering concerns or lingering questions, what about endgame? Are there going to be endgame activities? Seems like they've got a lot of tools they could use. You could have, curated environments where you go and it's really tough and the enemies are crazy and it's sort of organized and maybe even a little scripted, almost like a raid, like an MMO or something. Not quite, but you get what I'm saying. And then the other players could still be in there. You could opt to work together or not. And I think that is another lingering question. Because the last lingering question is, can an extraction shooter achieve mainstream status? Is this just going to end up being another niche title with like a core audience? Or could this achieve high level of players like we've seen for a game like Helldivers 2? It makes sense. Like, you look at Helldivers 2, it's like, it's PvE, it's co-op. They can sort of reinvigorate the player base with content. Well, you can't just reinvigorate a game like this with content. You need to have, wipes and things to chase and things to do ongoing, or you will lose players and then you'll only have that hardcore base. And then it makes it really difficult for people to re-engage or jump in for the first time because you've just got nothing but the sweaties left. I don't think that's going to be the case immediately with this game, but that's something that you're going to have to guard against long term, or you will just be another sort of niche extraction shooter, which maybe they're totally fine with that. Maybe they'd be thrilled to have like a healthy hardcore group. But I think this game is showing signs that it could break that mold and it could completely change what we think about extraction shooters at some level, proving some of the things I've said wrong. So we'll have to wait and see. But for now, this game's got what it takes in the right places, and it could be, I think, the first mainstream extraction shooter to break all of the previous records and thoughts about the genre. But those are just my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, show up to a live stream, and as always, hit like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.